Hi, my name's Bob Brown and welcome to No Particular Topic. I did a short introductory video which pretty much explains what this channel is about. And in short, it's about pretty much a whole bunch of different topics. One of my jobs was, in my career that is, I was a traffic homicide investigator with the Florida Highway Patrol. I'm going to talk about some of those cases and some of my more notable traffic stops. Well, I kind of racked my brains on what am I going to do for this first video? Well, I'm going to talk about how I became a cop. Well, you would think, it's something he always wanted to do, and he probably took some criminal justice courses to plan for this. No, not even close. No. As a matter of fact, I had zero plans on becoming a cop, not on my radar. Zero. Well, it was a complete accident. And I'm going to talk about, hey, accident, department. Oh, I guess that's a pun. Anyway, I'm going to talk about how I became a cop. I'm going to start this story in early 1984. I worked for a very large grocery store chain called Grand Union. And there she is. That's Grand Union. Here's a shot of the inside of the store. I shot these photos back in, I think it was 1978 or 1979. The general layout of the stores were pretty similar across all of the Grand Unions, with the office in the front, the checkouts, and all of the windows with the dog food piled out front. And that was pretty much the layout of all of the stores. These photos should help you visualize a lot of the story I tell on this particular topic. If you look in the far left, you can see some girl bagging groceries. That's my future wife, by the way. And, well, you know what? Let me get her and that girl on the phone out of the way. There you go. That red arrow shows the office. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Here's a better shot of my then future and now current wife, Donna. I decided to colorize this image just for the heck of it. I started Grand Union in about 1971 as a bag boy. I stayed with them until I think it was about 1975 when my parents moved to Central Florida. I went with them, hated every second of it, and after 2 years I went back and got my job back at Grand Union. I worked my way up through the company doing pretty much everything. I worked as a stock boy, a bagger, a cashier. I worked the produce department. I worked frozen food, dairy department. I worked in the a little bit in the meat department, not much, but in the deli. That's right. Oh my God, the deli. I'm not going to tell you how much I ate. Anyway, so that's a whole different story. Well, I did work my way up eventually to a front-end manager. And that was the last job I had with Grand Union. And I really liked that job. And my job was essentially to pretty much schedule the cashiers, the baggers, oversee them, also close the store, and a little bit of work in the office, not much. But that was a really good job, and I liked it. So anyway, Grand Union was really big in Texas, Florida. I think they were in Georgia, and the main office was in a place called Paramus, New Jersey, wherever that is. I think the only people who know where Paramus, New Jersey is are the people who live in Paramus, New Jersey. So anyway, we caught wind that Grand Union was going to close all of its stores in Texas. And we thought like, wow, I can't believe it. Like, poor Texas. That will never happen to us. Yep, it happened to us. We got notice they're going to close all of the stores in Florida. And it was all due to mismanagement. I mean, the usual story in that department. Well, I was going to be out of a job. And what they did was is they just emptied out the warehouses into the stores. The stores would sell out the stock and nothing new would come in. And once something sold out, that was it. It stayed out. And they offered some really good sales and deals for the shoppers. Well, one day I'm standing in the office and here comes Bob, the meat manager. Yeah, his name's Bob too. I think everybody's name was Bob back then. Anyway, so Bob comes up to me and he goes, "Say, Bob, did you ever find a new job?" I'm telling you, I'm saying it fast right now. This guy talks so slow. After 2 seconds of talking to this guy, you're almost suicidal. Super nice guy though. And I said, "No, Bob, no job yet." I didn't even look. And so he goes, "Did you ever think of joining the Florida Highway Patrol?" And in my head, I'm like, "What?" And I didn't show him that on my face. I just kind of, "I know, Bob. I never really gave it much thought. And I'll look into it." "Good. I think that's a really fine job." I go, "Okay, thanks, Bob." Took his paperwork because that's why he came up to the office in the first place. And I took that, threw it in the office. And then meanwhile, the countdown is going, the store's closing down. It took about 3.5 months for the store to completely close. Meanwhile, employees are leaving, and I guess I was one of the last hangouts, but I was also one of the managers, so it was, I decided to stay. Meanwhile, I did find a job at a place called Gardner's, a little hole in the wall grocery store, and I was going to be one of the managers in there. But before that, a couple weeks after I talked with Bob, he comes back up to me and he goes, "Say, Bob, did you ever check into the Florida Highway Patrol?" I'm like, ugh. And I said, "No, Bob, but I will look into it." And he goes, "Good." And he handed me his paperwork, threw it in the office. And I thought to myself, well, I do need a job. And, I think I'll fill out the application. And this is before I got the other job with the other grocery store. And so I said, "You know what, I'm going to keep an eye on these guys driving around in the patrol cars." And I did that. And I saw them. I said, "Oh, they don't do anything. I can do that." I was an idiot. So anyway, I did go down to the Florida Highway Patrol station and filled out an application. That is a picture of the building. However, the Florida Highway Patrol doesn't occupy that building anymore. They have a much newer office in a completely different location. Well, after I took that first test, I had to go back and take another test. For whatever reason, they decided to change the test. Then, not shortly thereafter, I had to go back again and take a psychological. And I did take that. Shockingly enough, I passed. And after that, I got called back again to take the same test over again. They changed that test. So I retook the psychological and passed it again. Yeah. Anyway, so not shortly thereafter, I had a physical I took. And, well, I was in really good shape back then. That's my dad on the left, my sister in the middle, and me on the right. My mom shot that in early 1985. At that time, I was in the process of preparing for a competition. And that was essentially the shape I was in when I went to take the physical for the Florida Highway Patrol. And you know what? I probably breezed right through it, right? No, that even was a problem. And what happened was I go in there and I thought I passed with flying colors, but the doctor said, "Well, Bob, you're overweight." And I go, "What?" I mean, I was in great shape back then. I was probably one of the best conditioned people who ever walked through his doors. And he goes, "Yeah, you're about 245 pounds at 6'3". I said, "Okay, so?" He goes, "Well, according to my chart, you're only supposed to be, what, 210 pounds." And I said, "Do I look like I'm out of shape?" I go, "That's for the average person. I'm not the average person. It's all muscle. Muscle weighs twice as much as fat. If I was 245 pounds of fat, yeah, okay, that's an issue. But I'm not, right?" And he looks and he goes, "All right, you pass." And that was it. So I passed the physical, but not without a little bit of a scare. And then, not far after that, I ended up at my new store. And again, I never planned on following through on being a cop. I did all of that just to create the illusion for anyone who asked that I was job hunting. But meanwhile, I did find a job over at Gardner's. Gardner's was another grocery store. And there it is, right there. Well, sort of, that is, because Gardner's is long gone. That's now a auto parts store. Gardner's really doesn't exist anymore, but that's the building. My first day at Gardner's, I was met by the general manager. His name was Clyde Mayberry. Yeah, that was his name. This guy looked like he was like a veteran of the American Civil War, which was what, 1861 to 1865. And he wasn't on the side of the North. He was definitely he definitely had a gray uniform if he was in that particular excursion. Anyway, uh, I ended up bringing in a bunch of cashiers and bag boys from Grand Union because they needed some more help, and which is not really relevant to the story, but I don't know, I'm digressing. Anyway, one day I'm in the store, and right now the time is about 1984, like right near the end of 1984. And you know how they have those magazines at the end of cash registers? They have gum and all that other stuff. So one day I'm just standing there and I open up one of the magazines, I look at it, and I look on the back page, and there's an advertisement for a cigarette. And I think it was Virginia Slims. I wouldn't put my life on it. But anyway, it was a big ad with a circle right there. It was like a color circle with all these speckles in it. But this isn't it, but it's a good example of the style of that ad. And there was this pack of cigarettes on the side, and a woman smoking a cigarette or holding a cigarette. It's been so long, I can't remember exactly. But uh, I just stared at that thing and I went, "This doesn't make any sense." By the way, this whole thing I'm going to tell you about will make some sense a little bit later in this story. Anyway, so I did look at it and I'm going like, I don't know what this means. So I went to the cashier and I showed her the back page and I said, "Does this make any sense to you?" And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "That's the size of the cigarette." I go, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Yeah, it's 120 for 120 millimeters." I go, "How do you get that out of this ad?" And she goes, "It's right there inside that circle." I go, what are you talking about?" She goes, "It's 120 is in those inside of that circle. I go, are you, what? Are you messing with me? She goes, no. Are you messing with me? And I go, no. And I'm going like, I don't know. So I took the magazine, the back page, and I showed it to one of the bag boys. I go, do you see a number there? And he goes, yeah, 120. What? I'm going, well, okay. So I felt like an idiot, but I didn't see any number there. And I assumed there was a number there, although I didn't see it. I was still skeptical. Anyway, more time passed by, and meanwhile, I got called back again for my final exam. And guess what that was? My eye exam. Wow, that went great. No, it didn't. Of course it didn't. So I went in there and I got my eye exam and I passed, no problem with the vision. And then after that, guess what? They had to check for color blindness. And what test did they give me? Remember those speckles with the circles and the speckles and the numbers? That was the test. Here's the chart. From the moment they showed this chart to me, oh my God, I knew I was in trouble. I put colored dots next to the ones that I could see and couldn't see and could kind of see. The red represents forget about it. I couldn't see any numbers. The yellow is I could kind of see a number, and the green meant I could see the number. How many reds do you see there? And how many greens do you see there? Man, I was in trouble. What's kind of weird, though, is when I converted the image to black and white, I could see all the numbers. I guess that explains why I gravitate towards black and white photography. So it was just like I thought. I didn't identify, I don't think, hardly any of the numbers inside those circles, and so it did not go well at all. And the optometrist said to me, he goes, well, I don't know how to tell you this, but I can't approve you because you're colorblind. And I looked at him and I said, no, I'm not. Maybe I was delusional, but I don't think so. And I said, no. And he said, yes, you are colorblind. And I go, no, I'm not colorblind. And he goes, listen, you can't even identify a number in that circle. I said, yes, I can't, but I can tell you every single color of every single speckle in that circle, including the colors outside the circle. How about that? And he said, well, do it. And I said, okay. And I went to every single speckle on that paper, on that chart or whatever it was. And I went red, green, blue, yellow, magenta, purple, whatever the color was, I identified every single color. And he looked at me and he goes, oh, wow. He goes, you know what? You're not colorblind. And so he then said, you have something else. And he said, we call that color confusion. That didn't sound any better to me, but, you know, I had to hear the guy out. He said, color confusion is where when you take small little teeny color speckles and things or patterns and you put them next to each other, they get lost. And that's different than color blindness. He goes, color confusion is not a disqualifier. So you passed. I go, I did? And he goes, yeah. Man, I got out of there fast before he had a chance to change his mind. So I was gone. So a little time goes by. And I think at that period, I went to Columbia, did some guest posing or something up there for a grand opening of a gym. And then when I got back, I started to prepare for my competition. As a matter of fact, here's a photo from that competition. So a little more time goes by, and when I went to work one day, there's Mr. Mayberry, and there's Mr. Gardner's son-in-law, who I guess he was the CEO of the company. And they said, Bob, we need to talk with you. And I said, oh, okay. And in my head, I'm thinking like, man, did I forget to do something? Did I not lock the doors? Did I didn't set the alarm? Did I not? I'm like, my brain's scrambling, like, what happened? So they said, hey, are you looking for another job? I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, because the Florida Highway Patrol came in here and did a background on you. I said, they did? I said, I didn't know. And they go, yeah. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Well, I filled out the application a long time ago. I thought in my head, I was like, I have no intentions of getting another job. But here's what they said to me. Well, if you're not going to make a career with us, we're going to have to let you go. Like, what? You're firing me? And they go, well, we're looking for someone who's more permanent. I'm like, but and they said, well, we're not going to leave you hanging. Here's a month's severance pay. And that was it. I got fired. Well, realistically, I never planned on making a career of gardeners. But, I mean, come on, I didn't expect to be fired. Anyway, I got on the phone right away with Charlie Harris. He was the recruiter. And I told him, I go, hey, Charlie. By the way, Charlie was a great, super nice guy and real helpful. And I said, hey, Charlie, you guys got me fired. And I explained what happened. And he was like, what? And they fired you? And I go, yeah. And he goes, okay, I'll see what I can do. Hang in there and I'll take care of it. And I said, okay. And about 3 weeks goes by and I get a letter in the mail. And on that letterhead, it said, the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. Well, the envelope, that is. And I show it to my wife and I'm like, what is this? So I open it up and this was what was in it. And the first line read, it is my pleasure to appoint you to August 5, 1985 as a law enforcement officer trainee. I looked over at my wife and I said, oh my f***ing God, I'm gonna be a cop. If interested, I do have another YouTube channel. It's called 8 and 35mm Restoration. On that channel, I posted a whole bunch of my old home movies. Some of them I shot in sound and some were silent. Of the silent ones, I did add some music, voiceovers, and sound effects on some of them. I also have a whole bunch of tutorials on how to digitize and process 8mm movies, still photography slides, photographs, and negatives. If you're interested, I did put a link in the description below.